Welcome to the Center Court MBA Festival in Washington, D.C., which of course is a great opportunity to meet we have deans, associate deans, admissions directors and senior staff from many of the world's top business schools from the US and Europe, but it's also an opportunity to meet with alumni. Now, we don't have a dress code for the Center Court MBA Festival, but of course, if your alumni show up in the colors of your school, that can only be a bonus. And I'm delighted to welcome Jill Landefeld.
Thank you very much.
An alumni of IESE Business School, and now a first vice president with Stiefel. So, Jill, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, delighted to be here.
Now, of course, you went through the whole process of applying to business school, the introspection that goes with it. What is one fun fact that maybe you did or you didn't share with the business school?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that always causes people that I know in my life to laugh is I travel often. I love to travel, and it was this love of meeting international cultures and connecting with people that were different than me and growing and learning as a person as a result of that, which first got me interested in pursuing an international MBA. And to this day, I travel often personally. I've been in India and Cuba for classmates' weddings this year to date, but I often travel for professional reasons as well. But people are always amused to learn that despite the fact that I am in planes all the time, I am an absolute unabashed white knuckle flyer. I get nervous to this day, and I often have people who will hold my hand or give me hugs, even on planes, seeing how nervous I am. And that always tends to amuse people, given the extent of my flights and also my frequent flyer status with all of the world's airlines.
Now, of course, the definition of courage is actually overcoming fear,
Indeed.
right? The business schools encourage you to think about things that you've achieved, whether you quantify that or something, perhaps personal. What is one accomplishment that you're particularly proud of, either professionally or personally?
Sure. I think one of the key accomplishments that I've been very proud of in my career is I did my undergraduate studies in foreign affairs and government, and so I was excellent at writing long papers that sounded very good on various philosophical arguments and what I thought that was beautiful in the world, but I didn't have a really analytical base. And I was working in politics here in Washington after graduation and wanted to challenge myself. I was working in an environment where I looked at the people around me, and it seemed like they were people who were kind of content to ride out their careers or had already experienced the apex of their career accomplishments, and I was hungry. I wanted to learn more. And so without a job, I actually moved myself up to New York. And this is one of those things I think you chalk up to doing in your early 20s, but would give you, nightmares at night trying to do it later in life. And I moved up to New York and used a headhunter to try to get myself into financial firms, albeit I had no finance experience and no financial expertise from an academic perspective. And so I went around to all the banks, and this was, again, the start of the credit crisis, where people had heard rumblings of mortgage defaults and banks being over-leveraged, but nothing had really collapsed yet. But yet the market was already slowly and very, in some ways quickly, deconsolidating. And so didn't end up getting a job at a bank, but actually got a job as a sales assistant at a hedge fund and was very much baptized by fire. And I was very proud of myself that through a lot of work and effort, I worked my way up within 2 years through the analyst level to be an associate on the desk there in the midst of the worst crisis in our generation. And I was particularly proud of the fact that when entire teams were getting called to the human resources manager's office and you would never see them again, our team never lost one person. And so it taught me the importance of togetherness, of standing up for the people that you work for, but also transparency and integrity as you go about delivering work for clients. This experience for me was also quite poignant because I happened to be sitting next to a woman on the trading desk in New York who had done an international MBA. And she knew I was flirting with the idea of doing an MBA. She knew I loved to travel. And she was the one that really encouraged me to pursue an international MBA. And she didn't mention any names. She didn't mention any brands. She just said, do the research and see where it takes you. And I must say, it took me to IESE, and I've sent her multiple letters of thank you to this day for opening my eyes up to what an international MBA could offer, particularly in an area which is so saturated with US programs.
Now, of course, you already demonstrate an ability to take a leap of faith, to take that journey up to New York. Same thing with an MBA and looking beyond those US boundaries and one of the top schools in Europe. What was it that really drew you to IESE Business School?
That's a great question. I thought IESE encapsulated all of the good things of a truly international program. So, of course, its location in Barcelona, the fact that it has satellite campuses in Germany, in New York, in Nairobi, and in Shanghai, where have you. But it was a truly international experience, and I wanted to connect with people who had different backgrounds than I did, but also different points of view. So it checked all those boxes, but it also had what I thought was the best of an American program. It's a 2-year degree. So everyone enters together. You do a summer internship, and that can be at any number of firms that are set up with you by the career services, or you can write your own business plan if you want to be an entrepreneur, or you can create your own internship. But then everyone comes back and does a second year. So everyone enters together and leaves together. And that notion of class solidarity, that notion of we have an identity as one class, really spoke to me, particularly in an area where a lot of the international programs that I looked at had options where you could do 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, 21 months. And I didn't want to be in an area where people were always coming and going. I wanted to really develop relationships with those that were around me, and that those would continue to this day. And so, of course, IESE had a top ranking, and that was initially what attracted me, because I was reviewing lists of rankings of schools that I wasn't familiar with at the time. I think international MBA programs are tremendously more recognized in the US than they were 10 or 15 years ago, but ultimately it's the ranking matters. And so I decided I was going to take part of my summer holiday and go abroad and visit Madrid and London and Paris and Barcelona. And I remember going on campus at IESE, and I felt like they really wanted to get to know who I was as a person. They wanted to know my background, and even when I was doing my admissions interview, I didn't actually even realize that it was a typical admissions interview, because it was enraptured with all the typical, well, what does an MBA do for you, and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, but it was all about who you are as a person and what your relationships with are, and what do you want to get out of this, and they made the interview process fun, actually.
When you look at the typical class profiles, we capture obviously the percentage of international students, very often their sort of professional background, but digging into value systems. And so beyond all of those brochures and website details, what did you really then discover about classmates? What would be characteristics that described that 2-year journey and the MBA classmates that you had?
I think they are all outgoing. They are intellectually curious, but they are also culturally curious. Everybody is there because they want to get an education, but they also want to grow personally and professionally. And I think that focus on personal development is as important as professional development. I look back at my time at IESE, and I realized in the classroom there, and IESE it follows the case method, and so we work in teams, so we have team meetings every morning, and they do that because they will assign you more work than you alone can handle, and so they realize the importance of sharing work, dividing work, and also relying on others to develop a product. But I realized that everybody was there because they wanted to grow together, and everyone in some ways was out of their comfort zone. And even if you were, say, a resident of Europe, or you were a Spanish resident, you were in a new environment, in a very intellectually and academically rigorous environment with people that you didn't know. Of course, the majority of the program is people from outside Spain. It's 85% international. And so you're surrounded by people who are from all over the world, adjusting to a new country, adjusting to a new program, adjusting to a new house and commute. Everyone is out of their comfort zone. And I think that makes people really want to be understood and develop bridges and connections. I think if you're in an area where it's more homogenous, or everyone's from the same place or from the same country, it's very easy to develop expectations or stereotypes. And in a truly international area, those all fall away. There is no way that I can look at someone who was developed the first pizza chain entrepreneurship in Saudi Arabia and know who he is. There was no one who I can look at and say, she worked in the Canadian Parliament before MBA. Oh, I know what she's about. I know that he worked for Honda in Japan. I know what he's about. So people are trying to really understand who you are as a person, and it makes our interchanges so open and honest, but it makes the connections and the bonds that you form literally long life lasting. And to this day, my dearest friends are from IESE. So I would call them always wanting to seek the best out of everybody, and to always be looking to discover what life has to offer, and always be willing to go and nurture those relationships. So right now, we plan reunions in one spot of the world every year. We're always traveling for reunions and weddings and bridal showers and baby showers to support each other. And we don't even question buying an international plane ticket to do that often. And thank goodness for WhatsApp, because I don't know where we'd be without it. It's the ability to connect across borders all the time.
So constantly learning about others, learning about yourself. Of course, you're no stranger to a steep learning curve with the early stages of your career. Is there one skill perhaps that you did then develop at IESE Business School that you have used in the next steps of your career?
Indeed. Every IESE student takes what's called a core curriculum in the first year. And so they're required, although you can specialize in the second year, everyone's required to develop a base level of knowledge. So even if you're for sure know that you want to be a management consultant when you graduate, you have to take accounting, you need to take entrepreneurship, you need to take marketing, you need to take management accounting and operations. So it's a very, very good entry level discipline, just to make sure that everyone graduates with a basic level and ability to express themselves across the disciplines in whatever environment they find themselves. One of the wonderful first year classes is called decision analysis, and it enables you to evaluate decisions and actually put quantitative metrics around both risk and potential outcomes. And I found it's been an incredible tool, both in my personal and professional life, because a lot of times you might just say, oh, this scares me, or I'm really excited about this, or I'm nervous, but I think this will be good. And it's very easy to just rely on subjective criteria to evaluate yourself, but this class actually taught me as to how do we quantify things and through that assign values and then prioritize one thing over another. And I found that it's been extremely valuable, not just in my professional life. So when I take a meeting, am I going to spend this amount of money on a conference in terms of what can I get back from it? If I'm going to change jobs, what am I leaving on the table versus what am I getting? If I'm going to move houses, if I'm going to move cities, how do I weigh those decisions in my personal life as well? And it's been an invaluable class, and I think that's what IESE does so well. It doesn't just instill you with a profound academic education, but it builds you up as people as well, better to able to take control of your own life and drive your path forward.
That's a big step, of course, the investment that you're making in yourself and the time and the money that requires. What do you now miss about the program and your time at IESE?
I think I just miss this notion of everyone being so vivacious and wanting to learn so much about each other and wanting to grow and to learn from each other and to experience all that life has to offer. I think once you graduate, you kind of you would address your job and your life, and that's why I think we seek to get together so often. There was a very, very profound comment that a IESE professor once made to me, and IESE follows the case method, so it is a very academic program, but the professors are always trying to imbue little bits of philosophy and psychology into their lessons. And I remember one time in our decision analysis class, in fact, which I was just explaining to you about, our professor, Professor Santiago, said to me, and he said to the class, he said, whenever you're looking at life, the only way that you can ever prove ownership of something, or whether it's knowledge, whether it's a shirt off your back, whether it's a piece of paper, is if you give it to others. And you give it to others freely and willingly, and perhaps without expectation that you ever get anything back in return. And he says that sharing of knowledge, as it were in this case, is how you truly prove mastery of it, and how you ever document it to anyone that it was yours in the first place. And I think that really resonates with the spirit of IESE. It's people trying to share who they are and their knowledge of other people, so that they can actually show that it was them who brought it there in the first place. And that's profoundly resonated with me as I go about my life, because it impacts how I structure my teams and how I mentor others, but also how I share who I am with people as I move forward in my life. I live in Washington, and we have a great ESA network here, but I have wonderful friends and colleagues from certainly that have never visited ESA, and certainly have never been to Barcelona. And so I'm able to take those realizations and those learnings with me as I go through my daily life here.
Now, of course, IESE as an institution also keeps giving back to you.
Yes, indeed.
So as you think about the next 5, 10 years of your career, um, where do you imagine yourself in the years ahead?
That's a great question. I work as a portfolio manager and as a portfolio construction expert right now for a bank here in Washington. Was working with Barclays Investment Bank for several years prior, and we are growing rapidly right now. We focus on institutional and foundation relationships here, and Stifel is a been around for 150 years, but they recently acquired a lot of linchpins in key East Coast and West Coast cities, and also are expanding very, very quickly internationally. And we recently opened an office in London and Geneva. And given my international experience and my love of travel, but also my ability, I think, to connect with people across cultural and national borders, I'm quite excited to help my firm pursue an international footprint and establish a stakehold in more cities across the world. I think we can be truly global using the phenomenal resources we have and the phenomenal people we have. And I'm excited to use my network and my experience to take Stifel forward.
Jill, you're a wonderful ambassador for IESE Business School. Thank you for giving back and for sharing your experience with our readers.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here tonight. Thank you.
So the Centre Court MBA Festival at DC will be in New York on Saturday with IESE Business School, among other top business schools from around the world. And thanks for joining us for the interview. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you very much. Thank you.